So today we're going to continue our study of box and whisker plots or just box plots. I'm going to look at some of the examples in the book. I'm going to be on page 880. But first, let's go back and refresh how we calculate the numbers that we need for a box and whisker graph. You first put your numbers in order from least to greatest. You then find the 5-number summary. The smallest number on your list, the minimum. The greatest number on your list, the maximum. The median, the number smack dab in the middle. And then the median of the lower half of the data, sometimes called Q1, first quartile, lower median, and the median of the upper half of the information, sometimes known as Q3, the third quartile, the upper median. You then mark those 5 numbers on a number line and connect them so that you've got a box in the middle and then 2 things that go out to make what we call the whiskers. And it looks something like this. Okay. Now, if you remember, we talked yesterday, the quartiles split the data into 4 equal-sized groups. So right here, this is 1/4 or 25% of the data. This first part of the box is 25% of the data. This part of the box is 25% of the data, and this line is 25% of the data. So if I want to talk about half, if I'm trying to find information about my group, and I say, well, half of the speeds were 25 miles an hour or less, because 25% plus 25% is 50%, and 50% is half. I could also say that 50%, half of my information, is greater than 25 or between 25 and 40. I could say that half of my information, most typically what people would do, falls between, what's that, about 22 and 34. Half of my information falls between 22 and 34. You could also say 75%, most of my information is less than 35, which is true because 75%, more than half, is less than 35. It's not exactly 35, it's a little bit less. One other thing that we didn't talk about yesterday is something called the interquartile range, sometimes known as the IQR, because interquartile range is a lot to spit out. To find the interquartile range, or the IQR, you subtract Q3 and Q1. Just like regular range is your highest minus your lowest, the interquartile range is your quartiles subtracted. So in this case, this will be my Q3, 34. This would be my Q1, 22. So 34 minus 22 is 12. I have an IQR of 12. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that 50% of our information is 12 miles an hour apart. It gives us an idea of how spread out the information is. If the box was smaller, our IQR would be smaller. If the box is wider, the IQR would be bigger. It doesn't worry about extremes. It doesn't worry about potential outliers. It worries about a bulk of the information. Maybe you use the word typical. All right, let's go look at another one that we made. Actually, no, let's look at this. So I flipped to page 882. And here's one. The number of games won in the American Football Conference, the AFC, in a recent year is displayed below. Find the median and the measures of variability. So we've talked a lot about the measures of center, the mean, and the median. But now we want to talk about the measures of variability. How spread out is our information? So they specifically mention the median. I'm going to say the median is 8.5. Because it's right in the middle. Now, how do you win 8.5 games? Maybe a tie. Maybe it's just a calculation number. You can't actually win a half a game. We're not worried about that. But then they want to talk about the measures of variability. So let's talk about the IQR. How far apart are my quartiles? Well, this is 5.5. And this is exactly at 11. So 11 minus 5.5 is 5.5. It doesn't talk about the extreme, somebody who had a really lousy season and only won 1 game, or the extreme where somebody had an amazing season and won all 13. This talks about typical. Half of the teams were spread out by only 5.5 games difference. Okay, we use these all the time when we talk about sports statistics, but they may use different words. They don't usually talk about the interquartile range on SportsCenter, but that's actually what they're reporting. So I'm going to have you go back and look at some of the problems that we did yesterday. If you don't have them done, I would suggest you go do that lesson first and then come back and pick up with what we're talking about today.